Welcome to my channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The notification came at 3:47 a.m. Not the usual time for an Amazon delivery update, but there it was, lighting up my phone screen in the darkness of my bedroom. Your package will arrive Tuesday. That was it. No tracking number, no order details, just that simple, unsettling message. I didn't remember ordering anything. Before we dive into what happened the Tuesday that changed everything, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you is real, every word. And if you've been getting strange delivery notifications lately, packages you didn't order, items that seem to know exactly what you need before you need them, then you might want to listen very carefully to what happened to me in suburban Portland, Oregon. The story begins now. Tuesday morning arrived like any other October day in the Pacific Northwest. Gray skies, light drizzle. The kind of weather that makes you want to stay wrapped in blankets with a cup of coffee. I was working from home, as usual, typing away at quarterly reports when the doorbell rang at exactly 11:11 a.m. Through the peephole, I saw the familiar brown uniform of a delivery driver already walking back to their truck. A single package sat on my doorstep, medium-sized. Nothing special about it except the shipping label had my name, Sarah Chen, and my address perfectly printed. But where the sender information should have been, there was just a black square, completely black. Like someone had taken a Sharpie and blocked it out, but when I touched it, the surface was smooth. Printed that way. I brought it inside, set it on my kitchen counter. The box felt heavier than it looked, dense and cold, unusually cold for something that had just been delivered. My laptop dinged with an email. Another Amazon notification, your package has been delivered. We hope it serves you well. Serves me well? Strange wording. I grabbed a knife from the drawer and sliced through the tape. Inside, wrapped in that typical Amazon air cushion packaging, was a flashlight. Not just any flashlight, a heavy-duty military-grade LED flashlight with fresh batteries already installed. Weird. I definitely hadn't ordered this. I clicked it on. The beam was intense, almost unnaturally bright. I turned it off and set it aside, figuring it was probably delivered to the wrong address, even though it had my name. These things happen. That night, at exactly 9:17 p.m., the power went out. Not just my house, the entire neighborhood. I looked out my window and saw nothing but darkness stretching down Maple Street. No streetlights, no porch lights, nothing. Then I remembered the flashlight. My hands found it instantly in the dark, like they knew exactly where I'd left it. The beam cut through the darkness of my house, and I made my way to the garage to check the breaker box. Everything looked fine, but the power stayed off for 3 hours. 3 hours where that flashlight was the only source of light I had. My phone was at 12% battery. My laptop was dead. But that flashlight, it never dimmed. Not once. When the power finally came back on, I found myself staring at the box it came in. How did someone know? How could they have known? The next Tuesday, another notification at 3:47 a.m. Another package announcement. This time I was awake, waiting for it. My heart pounded as I read the simple message. Your package will arrive Tuesday. I didn't go to work that day. I sat by my front window, watching, waiting. At 11:11 a.m., like clockwork, the doorbell rang. Same driver, same quick departure. Same type of box with the blacked-out sender information. This time it was a first aid kit, comprehensive. The kind with sutures, emergency medications, even a tourniquet. Why would I need? The accident happened that afternoon. My neighbor, Mike Harrison, was trimming his hedge when the ladder slipped. I heard the scream from my backyard. He'd gashed his leg badly on the metal fence. Blood was everywhere. His wife was screaming. Someone called 911, but the ambulance would take at least 15 minutes. I ran inside, grabbed the first aid kit, and managed to stop the bleeding with the tourniquet. The EMT said I probably saved his life. Said if I hadn't had exactly the right supplies, Mike survived. But I couldn't stop thinking about the timing, the impossible timing. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with both packages in front of me. The flashlight, the first aid kit, items I needed exactly when I needed them. It wasn't possible. It wasn't. Unless someone was watching me. Unless someone knew what was going to happen before it happened. I checked my Amazon account. No order history for either item. I called customer service. They had no record of deliveries to my address on those dates. According to them, these packages didn't exist, but I was holding them. They were right there in front of me. The next Tuesday came faster than I wanted. The 3:47 a.m. notification was expected now. I didn't even flinch when my phone lit up. But this time, the message was different. Your package will arrive Tuesday. Do not refuse delivery. Do not refuse delivery. My hand shook as I read it again and again. That morning, I considered leaving. just getting in my car and driving away. But something kept me there. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fear of what would happen if I wasn't there to receive it. Maybe I was starting to depend on these packages. 11:11 a.m. Doorbell. Package. This time, a carbon monoxide detector. I already had one, but I installed this new one anyway. In my basement, where the old furnace sat, the thing started beeping immediately. Dangerous levels. I called the gas company, and they found a leak in the furnace that could have killed me in my sleep within days. 3 packages. 3 times they'd saved me or someone near me. But nothing is free. I knew that. There's always a price. By the 4th Tuesday, I'd stopped trying to understand how. I was focused on why. Why me? Why these specific items? What did whoever was sending these want from me? The notification came as expected, but this time there was an addition. Your package will arrive Tuesday. Payment due soon. Payment. There it was. The package that day was different, smaller. When I opened it, I found a single key. An old-fashioned brass key with an address tag. 22047 Riverside Drive, basement. Tonight, 11:11 p.m. I knew that address. It was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Portland. The kind of place where people went to do things they didn't want others to see. The kind of place you didn't go alone at night. But I went. Of course I went. The packages had saved my life 3 times over. I owed something, someone. The flashlight from the first package lit my way through the broken entrance. The building was exactly what you'd expect. Broken windows, graffiti, the smell of rust and decay. The basement door was locked, but the key fit perfectly. The stairs down were concrete, each step echoing in the darkness. At the bottom, a single bulb flickered to life, motion activated. The room was empty except for a table in the center. On it, another package. This one had a note, open only when you return home. I grabbed it and ran. Ran like something was chasing me, though nothing was. The drive home was a blur of red lights I barely stopped for and turns I took too fast. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Back in my house, doors locked, curtains drawn, I opened the package. Inside was a phone, not a smartphone. An old flip phone, the kind from the early 2000s. It was already on, battery full. There was one contact saved, Tuesday. Before I could think about what I was doing, I called. The voice that answered wasn't human. I'm certain of that. It was multiple voices, maybe. Layered. Speaking in unison, but slightly off sync. Sarah Chen, it said. You have received our gifts. Who are you? My voice cracked. We are Tuesday. We are the prevention of endings. We are the suppliers of need. What do you want from me? Nothing you haven't already given. Your acceptance, your trust, your participation in the pattern. What pattern? What are you talking about? Every Tuesday, someone receives what they will need to survive the week ahead. You were chosen. You accepted. Now you must choose. Choose what? Choose the next recipient. Tomorrow you will receive a list of 3 names, 3 addresses. You must choose one by 3:47 a.m. Tuesday. They will receive what they need. The pattern continues. And if I don't, silence. Then the packages stop coming, all of them, retroactively. Retroactively. That doesn't even make. The line went dead. The phone turned off and wouldn't turn back on. The next morning, Wednesday, a final package arrived. Inside was a single piece of paper with 3 names, 3 addresses, all in Portland. Regular people. A teacher. A nurse. A retail worker. How was I supposed to choose who got saved and who didn't? I spent days researching the names. Rachel Morrison, the teacher at Lincoln Elementary. David Park, the ICU nurse at Portland General. Amanda Torres, who worked at the Target on 82nd Avenue. I drove by their houses, watched them from a distance. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that their survival might depend on a stranger's decision. The weight of it was crushing me. Monday night, I couldn't sleep. The deadline was approaching, 3:47 a.m. Tuesday. I sat at my kitchen table with the paper in front of me, a pen in my hand. How do you choose who deserves to be saved? How do you play God? At 3,000 a.m., I made my choice. Not based on who deserved it most, how could I even judge that? But based on a feeling, a pull. Something deep in my gut that said Rachel Morrison, the teacher. She needed this. I wrote her name on the paper, her address. At exactly 3:47 a.m., the paper disappeared. Not burned, not dissolved. It was there 1 second, gone the next. My phone buzzed. Choice received. Pattern continues. That Tuesday, I didn't receive a package. But I drove by Rachel's house at 11:11 a.m., watched the delivery driver drop off a medium-sized box, watched her confused face as she picked it up. I wanted to warn her, tell her to treasure whatever was inside, tell her it would save her life. But the pattern had rules. I understood that now. The Tuesdays continued. Every week, a new list. 3 names, 1 choice. I became the curator of survival, the selector of the saved. Some weeks, I'd see news reports. A house fire where the family escaped because of a smoke detector that had just been mysteriously delivered. A hiker found alive because of emergency supplies they'd received as an unexpected gift. A child's allergic reaction stopped by an EpiPen that arrived just days before. But for every person saved, 2 weren't, 2 names not chosen. And sometimes I'd see those reports too. The teacher whose carbon monoxide detector never arrived. The elderly man who didn't get the emergency alert system. The family who didn't receive the disaster preparedness kit. I stopped watching the news. It's been 6 months now, 26 Tuesdays, 26 choices. 26 people who are alive because their name ended up on my kitchen table at 3 a.m. But here's the thing that keeps me awake every single night. Last week, the pattern changed. The phone, the one that had been dead for months, suddenly rang. That same layered, inhuman voice, Sarah Chen. "You have served well. The pattern is pleased." "Please," I begged, "let me stop. I can't keep choosing." "The pattern does not stop, but your role can change." "Change how?" "You may pass the responsibility. Choose your replacement." "They will receive the first package next Tuesday. And if I don't, then you continue, forever, or until you fail to choose, and then all the packages stop coming, all of them, for everyone, retroactively." The line went dead again, so now I'm faced with the ultimate choice. Keep carrying this burden, deciding who lives and who doesn't every single week, or pass it on to someone else, make them the curator of survival. I need to tell you what happened 3 weeks ago, what I haven't been able to admit to anyone, what's been eating away at me every single moment since. The list came as usual. 3 names, but this time one of them was familiar, Jennifer Chen, my sister. My hands shook so badly I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the kitchen floor, her name staring up at me like an accusation. Jennifer, who lived across town with her husband and their 2-year-old daughter. Jennifer, who called me every Sunday without fail. Jennifer, who didn't know about the packages, about the pattern, about any of this. The other 2 names were strangers, Marcus Williams, a construction worker, and Elena Rodriguez, a college student at Portland State. I had 72 hours to choose. For the first time since becoming a curator, I tried to break the rules. I called the 2-use-day phone, pressing the buttons over and over, but it stayed dead. I tried to choose all 3 names. I tried to choose no one. I even drove back to that warehouse on Riverside Drive, but the basement door was sealed shut, welded from the inside somehow. The pattern had rules. The pattern couldn't be broken. Monday night arrived. Jennifer called at 8 p.m. like always. "Hey Sarah, just checking in. You sound tired lately. Everything okay?" I wanted to scream, wanted to tell her everything, wanted to warn her that her life was hanging by a thread and I was the one holding the scissors. But the words wouldn't come. They never did when I tried to talk about the pattern. It was like my throat closed up, my tongue forgot how to form the syllables. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just work stress." "Well, don't work too hard. Love you too." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with the paper. 3 names, 3 lives. Only one would receive what they needed to survive the week ahead. The other 2 would be left vulnerable, exposed to whatever fate had planned for them. I told myself I could be rational about this, that choosing Jennifer wasn't favoritism, it was logic. She had a child, a family. Didn't that make her more valuable? Didn't that tip the scales? But then I thought about Marcus Williams. I'd looked him up. Single father of 3 teenage boys after his wife died of cancer 2 years ago, working double shifts to keep them fed and in school. Who was I to decide his children mattered less than Jennifer's? And Elena Rodriguez, 20 years old, her whole life ahead of her. Full scholarship student studying biomedical engineering. Maybe she'd cure cancer one day. Maybe she'd save thousands of lives. How could I weigh one potential future against another? At 3,000 a.m. I still hadn't decided. The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. At 3:30 a.m. I wrote Jennifer's name, then crossed it out, then wrote it again. At 3:45 a.m. with tears streaming down my face, I made my choice. I chose Marcus Williams. Not because he deserved it more than my sister. Not because his life was more valuable, but because I couldn't be the person who saved her own blood over a stranger. I couldn't live with knowing I'd rigged the system, broken the pattern's strange, terrible fairness. If I chose Jennifer, I'd become something worse than a curator. I'd become the thing that made this whole nightmare possible. I'd be saying that some lives matter more than others based on who knows the curator. And if that was true, if that's what the pattern really was, then maybe it shouldn't continue at all. At 3:47 a.m., the paper vanished with Marcus Williams' name written on it. My phone buzzed. Choice received. Pattern continues. I vomited in the kitchen sink. Then I sat on the floor and cried until the sun came up. That Tuesday, at 11:11 a.m., Marcus Williams received a package containing a life jacket and emergency beacon. That Friday, his fishing boat capsized in the Columbia River during a sudden storm. He was the only one of 4 men who survived. The life jacket kept him afloat. The beacon brought the Coast Guard. I read about it in the paper, saw his picture, saw his 3 sons hugging him at the hospital, and I felt nothing, no relief, no satisfaction, just a hollow, aching emptiness. Because that Thursday, 2 days after Marcus got his package, Jennifer called me. Her voice was shaking. "Sarah, something weird happened. I got this notification about an Amazon delivery, but nothing came. And then last night, I had the strangest dream. I dreamed I was drowning, and you were standing on the shore, watching. You had a rope in your hands, but you just stood there." My blood turned to ice. "Jen, it's silly, I know. Just a weird dream. But it felt so real, like you had to make a choice and you chose not to help me." "Isn't that strange?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "Sarah, you there?" "I'm here. Anyway, I should go. Maya's crying. Talk soon, okay?" She hung up, and I sat there holding the phone, knowing that somewhere in the multiverse of probability and fate, my sister had needed something. My sister had needed saving, and I had chosen someone else. The worst part? She was fine. That whole week came and went, and nothing happened to her. No accident, no emergency, no life-threatening situation that required an unexpected package. She didn't need to be saved that week at all, but Elena Rodriguez did. The college student whose name I didn't choose. She collapsed in her dorm room from an undiagnosed heart condition on Wednesday. They found her Thursday morning. The RA had been complaining about the dorm's faulty smoke detectors and carbon monoxide sensors all semester, but maintenance kept putting off the repairs. If she'd had a personal medical alert device, if she'd gotten a package containing a cardiac monitor or an emergency call button, maybe someone would have found her in time. I didn't attend her funeral, but I drove by it, watched from across the street as her family grieved. Her mother collapsed at the graveside. Her father had to be held up by relatives, and I stood there invisible, knowing that I had killed her just as surely as if I'd stopped her heart myself. That's when I understood the real horror of the pattern. It's not just about choosing who to save. It's about living with the knowledge that you chose who wouldn't be saved, that their blood is on your hands forever, and there's no way to know if you chose right. Marcus Williams survived because of his package, but maybe he would have survived anyway. Maybe one of the other men on that boat would have had a life jacket to share. Maybe the Coast Guard would have found them in time. But Elena definitely needed saving, and I didn't choose her. The pattern doesn't tell you who will need help. It just makes you choose, and then shows you afterward whether you were right or wrong. It's a game of Russian roulette where you're the one deciding which chambers have bullets and which are empty, and you never, ever know until it's too late. Since then, I've been different. My coworkers have noticed, my family's noticed. Jennifer keeps asking if I'm okay, and every time she does, I see Elena Rodriguez's mother collapsing at that graveside. I've lost 15 pounds. I don't sleep more than 2 hours at a time. Every Tuesday I make a choice, and every day after, I scan the news obsessively to see if I chose wrong, to count the bodies. I've chosen right 11 times out of the last 13. 2 people died because I picked the wrong name. 2 families destroyed. 2 futures erased. The pattern calls that an 85% success rate. I call it murder. I need to tell you about the support group. Yes, there's a support group for curators. I found out about it 2 months ago when the flip phone rang again. Different voice this time. Human, female, tired. Sarah Chen? Who is this? My name is David Reyes. I was a curator before you. I'm calling because you need to know you're not alone. None of us are. She gave me an address, a community center in Beaverton, Thursday nights at 8 p.m., room 1114, no sign on the door. Just come in and sit down. I almost didn't go. But that Thursday, I drove there, parked in the back, watched people trickle in through a side entrance. Normal-looking people. A man in a business suit, a woman in hospital scrubs, a teenager who couldn't have been more than 17, an elderly man with a cane. I followed them in. Room 1114 was set up like every support group you've ever seen in movies. Circle of chairs, fluorescent lighting, coffee pot in the corner. About 15 people sitting in various states of exhaustion. The woman who'd called me stood up, David Reyes. Hispanic, maybe 45, with dark circles under her eyes that looked permanent. Everyone, this is Sarah. She's been a curator for 6 months. A few people nodded. No one looked surprised. No one asked how she knew. Sarah, welcome. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. But you should know, everyone in this room has made the choice. Everyone here knows what Tuesday morning feels like. I sat down, and for the next 2 hours I listened to stories that made my blood run cold. Marcus from Seattle had been a curator for 9 years, 9 years of weekly choices. 468 people saved, 936 not chosen. He'd tried to kill himself twice. The pattern brought him back both times. Packages containing activated charcoal, naloxone, whatever he needed to survive his own attempts to escape. "You can't die while you're a curator," he said flatly. "The pattern won't let you. I've tried everything. Pills, carbon monoxide, even jumped off the Aurora Bridge." Woke up in my bed the next morning with a package on my doorstep containing medical supplies and a note that said, "Your choice is due Tuesday." Lisa from Eugene had been a curator for 3 years. She'd started keeping a journal of every name, every choice, every outcome. She brought it to the meeting. 3 leather-bound books filled with names, dates, and causes of death. 156 people died because I chose wrong, she whispered. "I have their obituaries, their funeral programs. I go to every funeral I can. It's the least I can do. Bear witness to what I've done." The teenager James had only been a curator for 3 months. He'd been chosen when he was 16. He talked about failing his midterms because he couldn't concentrate, about his parents thinking he was on drugs because of the insomnia and weight loss, about the girl in his chemistry class whose name appeared on a list, and how he chose someone else because he thought she was annoying. "She died in a car accident 4 days later," he said, staring at his hands. "Icy roads, lost control." If she'd gotten the package, maybe it would have been tire chains, or emergency road flares, or something, but I chose the other name because I thought she was annoying. He started crying. No one moved to comfort him. We all just sat there, drowning in our collective guilt. David spoke last. "She'd been a curator for 11 years before she passed it on. I held the record in this room," she said. 11 years, 572 choices. "But here's what the pattern doesn't tell you in the beginning. Here's what you need to know, Sarah, and anyone else who's new to this." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. "The pattern is spreading. When I started, I was choosing from 3 names in Portland. By year 5, it was 3 names anywhere in Oregon. By year 10, it was 3 names anywhere in the Pacific Northwest. The longer you're a curator, the wider your territory becomes, and the pattern never runs out of names." "What are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying that Marcus over there is currently choosing from names across the entire western United States. 3 names every week from Washington to Texas, from California to Colorado. The pattern grows with you, it feeds on you, and the longer you do it, the more power it has." Marcus nodded slowly. "Last week, one of my names was in Las Vegas. The week before, Salt Lake City. I can't keep track anymore, can't research them, can't watch their houses. I just choose 3 names I've never heard of in cities I've never been to, and then I check the news and count the bodies." "Why?" I asked. "Why does it spread? What is the pattern trying to do?" David shook her head. "We don't know. Some of us think it's trying to cover the entire world. 1 curator per region, all choosing, all feeding the pattern. Others think it's something else, something worse. What could be worse than this?" An old man I hadn't heard speak yet cleared his throat. His name was Robert. He'd been a curator in the 1980s, he said. Passed it on in 1991. "I've been researching the pattern for 33 years, Robert said. Ever since I stopped being a curator, and I've found things, references, historical records. There have always been curators. Different names, different methods, but the same basic structure. In the 1-800s, it was letters delivered by mysterious couriers. In the 100-700s, it was packages left at doorsteps by unknown benefactors, going back centuries." "How far back?" I asked. "As far as I can trace, medieval Europe. Ancient Rome. There are even references in older texts that might be about the same thing. The pattern is old, Sarah, older than countries, older than religions, and it's patient." "Patient for what?" Robert's eyes were haunted. "I think it's cultivating us, training us. Every curator who passes on the responsibility, every person who accepts that first package, we're all becoming part of something, building towards something. And when enough of the world is connected to the pattern, when enough people have accepted deliveries and made choices..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The meeting ended at 10 p.m. People exchanged phone numbers, hugged each other with the desperate intensity of soldiers who'd survived the same war. David pulled me aside as I was leaving. "Sarah, I need to tell you something else, something I only tell the newer curators." "What?" "You asked the pattern what happens if you don't choose. It said everything stops, retroactively. Do you understand what that means? That the packages stop coming, that people don't get saved?" "No," she grabbed my arm. "It means reality rewrites itself. Every person who was saved by a package suddenly wasn't saved. Every survivor dies. Every rescue fails. All at once, across all of time." My legs felt weak. That's not possible, isn't it? The pattern can predict the future perfectly. It can make objects appear and disappear. It can prevent curators from dying. Why couldn't it rewrite the past? She released my arm. Marcus did the math once, based on how long curators have existed and how many people each one saves. If the pattern stops, we're looking at millions of retroactive deaths, maybe tens of millions. Maybe more. That's genocide. That's leverage. That's how it keeps us choosing. We're not just deciding who lives next week. We're holding up the entire weight of everyone who's ever been saved. And if we stop, she spread her hands, millions die, including probably ourselves. Because somewhere in the past, a curator chose to save one of our ancestors. I drove home in a daze, sat in my driveway for an hour before I could make myself go inside. Everything David said kept echoing in my head. The spreading territory, the historical records, the retroactive deaths. The pattern wasn't just a mysterious force delivering packages. It was a global system, a network of curators all making choices, all saving and condemning, all trapped in the same impossible situation. And I was just one small part of it. One tiny gear in a machine that had been running for centuries. The question wasn't whether I could stop being a curator. The question was whether I should. Because if David was right, if the pattern really could rewrite reality, then stopping meant killing everyone the pattern had ever saved. Including, possibly, myself. Including, possibly, Jennifer and her daughter. Including Marcus Williams and his 3 sons and every other person whose name I'd chosen over the past 6 months. The weight of it is crushing, unbearable. Every Tuesday I don't just choose 3 people. I choose to keep millions of others alive. I choose to maintain a system I don't understand and can't escape. I choose to be complicit in something vast and terrible and ancient. And the worst part, I'm going to pass it on soon. I have to. I can't carry this much longer. My territory is already expanding. Last week, one of my names was in Salem. This week, one was in Eugene. Soon it'll be Seattle, then Vancouver, then who knows where. I'll choose someone to replace me. Some innocent person will receive that first package, use what's inside, and become part of the pattern. And they'll eventually join the support group on Thursday nights, and they'll sit in that circle and talk about the people they've killed through their choices. It always continues. So now you know. All of it. The truth about what it means to be a curator. It's not power. It's not some gift or special ability. It's a curse that slowly strips away your humanity, piece by piece, choice by choice. I've been watching you, all of you reading this. Listening to this. Because here's the truth. This story isn't just a story. It's a warning, and it's a test. Somewhere out there, someone is going to receive a package next Tuesday, a package they didn't order, with something they're going to desperately need. And when they do, they'll think it's a mistake, a coincidence, a bit of good luck, but it's not. It's the pattern. And once you accept that first package, once you use what's inside, you're part of it forever. My choice is due tomorrow at 3:47 a.m. A name, an address. Someone who will become the new curator. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But it might be you. Check your doorstep next Tuesday at 11:11 a.m. And if there's a package you didn't order, a package with your name but no sender, maybe think twice before opening it, or maybe don't. Maybe you'll need what's inside. Maybe it'll save your life. But remember, every gift has a price. And sometimes the price is becoming the one who decides who pays it next. Sweet dreams, everyone. And if your phone buzzes at 3:47 a.m. next Tuesday, if you get a notification about a package, just remember, you can refuse delivery. But then again, what if that package contains exactly what you need to survive? What if refusing it means, well, I guess you'll have to decide for yourself. The pattern continues. It always continues. And now that you've heard this story, now that you know about the Tuesday deliveries, you're already part of it. The pattern knows you. It's already decided if you're going to be a recipient, a curator, or one of the names not chosen. Sleep tight. Oh, and one more thing. If you're listening to this late at night, if it's dark outside and you're alone, you might want to check if you have a working flashlight nearby. Just in case the power goes out. It would be such a shame if you didn't have what you needed, when you needed it, wouldn't it? Story number 2. The woman in the red coat was crying again. I noticed her because, well, you could not notice her. Grand Central Terminal at rush hour is a river of gray suits and black coats, everyone moving with that particular Manhattan urgency that says I have somewhere important to be. But she just stood there, perfectly still, right in the middle of the main concourse, red coat, white gloves, and tears streaming down her face as she stared up at the departure board. "Ma'am?" I approached carefully, my Starbucks getting cold in my hand. "Are you okay? Can I help you find your train?" She turned to me, and something in her eyes made my stomach drop, not fear exactly. More like recognition. like she'd been waiting for me specifically. "Track 13, she whispered. "I need to find track 13. I almost laughed. Almost. "There is no track 13 at Grand Central. The platform skipped from 12 to 14. It's kind of a New York thing. It's like buildings without a 13th floor." She grabbed my wrist. Her white glove was ice cold through my jacket. "Please," she said. "My daughter, she took the train from track 13 3 days ago. She hasn't come home." Before I could respond, she pressed something into my palm, a ticket. Old-fashioned, the kind they used decades ago. The ink was faded, but I could just make out the words, "Track 13, destination, Millbrook Station, departure." When the last star fades, "I'm sorry," I started to say, but when I looked up, she was gone, just vanished into the crowd like smoke. The only proof she'd been there at all was the ticket in my hand and a lingering scent of roses. Dead roses. I should have thrown the ticket away, should have chalked it up to another weird New York moment, and gone home to my studio apartment in Queens. But if you're listening to this, if you're still here, then you already know I didn't. Because some invitations, once extended, can't be refused. The story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and I worked, as a digital marketing manager for a startup in Flatiron. The kind of job where you answer emails at midnight and pretend green juice makes up for never seeing sunlight. I tell you this because I need you to understand. I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghost stories. I analyze data. I trust spreadsheets. I definitely don't chase mysteries handed to me by crying women who disappear into thin air. But that ticket, I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, in my apartment, I spread it out on my kitchen counter under the harsh LED light. The paper felt wrong somehow. Too thick, too old. And when I ran my finger across the text, the words seemed to shift slightly, like they were printed on water instead of paper. Millbrook Station. I'd never heard of it, and I'd lived in New York for 7 years. I pulled out my phone, typed it into Google Maps. No results. Tried Apple Maps. Nothing. Even tried some old transit forums where train enthusiasts argue about discontinued subway lines. Millbrook Station didn't exist. Never had, according to every record I could find. But here's where it gets interesting, and where you need to pay attention, because this is the part that started everything. I found one mention, just one. A single post on an urban exploration blog from 2019. No comments. Barely any views. The blogger claimed he'd found references to a track 13 in some old Grand Central blueprints from 1913, back when the terminal was being built. According to him, it was supposed to be a private platform for wealthy families traveling to estates up north, places that aren't on any map anymore. Places that maybe never were on maps to begin with. The blogger's name was Marcus Webb. I tried to contact him through the site, but his last post was 3 years ago. His final entry was just one line. "Found it. Going through tonight. If you don't hear from me, don't come looking." I should have stopped there. Any rational person would have. But I kept thinking about that woman's eyes, the way she said, "My daughter," the desperation in her voice. And, okay, this sounds crazy, but I swear the ticket was getting warmer, like it had a pulse, like it was alive and waiting. 3 nights later, I went back to Grand Central. It was different after midnight. If you've never been there when it's empty, you can't understand how wrong it feels. During the day, it's this gorgeous chaos of life and movement. The constellation ceiling, the golden clock, thousands of people rushing through their lives. But at night, it's a cathedral of shadows. Every footstep echoes, every whisper becomes a shout. And the spaces between the pillars seem to stretch forever, like the building is bigger on the inside than it should be. I stood where I'd met the woman in the red coat. The ticket was in my pocket, and yes, it was definitely warm now, almost hot. "Track 13, I whispered to the empty hall. Nothing happened. I felt like an idiot, standing there in the middle of the night, talking to myself, chasing a story that a grieving woman, probably mentally ill, had told me. I turned to leave. That's when I heard it. The kind you hear in old movies. And it was coming from below, from somewhere beneath the main concourse where no trains should be. The ticket in my pocket began to burn. I took it out, and the words were glowing. Actually glowing with a soft golden light that made my hands look like they belonged to someone else. Someone already dead. And new words were appearing beneath the destination. "The invitation has been accepted. Proceed to the lower level. Follow the roses." That same dead flower scent from before, but stronger. It was coming from the stairs that led down to the food court. My feet started moving before my brain could stop them. Down the marble steps, past the closed restaurants, past the locked shops, the smell getting stronger with every step. The food court was pitch black, except for the emergency exit signs. But there, in the corner where the wall met the floor, I saw them. Rose petals, red as blood, arranged in a trail that led to a section of wall I'd passed 100 times before. Smooth marble, nothing special about it. Except now, there was a door. I need you to understand, this door wasn't hidden. It simply hadn't existed until that moment. Made of dark wood with brass hinges that belonged to another century, and above it, barely visible in the darkness, a sign, Track 13, members only. The handle was ice cold. I turned it. The stairway behind the door descended far deeper than it should have. Grand Central has levels, sure, but this went down and down, the air getting colder with each step. The walls changed from marble to brick, then from brick to carved stone that looked ancient. Older than New York. Older than anything should be in Manhattan. I counted the steps at first, 20, 50, 100. After 200 I stopped counting because the number was making me dizzy. Or maybe it was the air. It tasted different down here. Like copper and rain and something else, something sweet and rotten. The rose petals continued to lead the way, glowing faintly in the darkness. I used my phone's flashlight, but the light seemed to get swallowed up after a few feet, like the darkness was hungry for it. Finally, I reached the bottom. The platform stretched out before me, lit by gas lamps that couldn't have been burning, but there they were, casting everything in a golden glow that made the shadows dance. The walls were covered in tiles. Beautiful Art Nouveau patterns that shifted when you weren't looking directly at them. Flowers becoming faces. Faces becoming skulls. Skulls becoming flowers again. But it was the train that made me stop breathing. It sat there on the track like something out of a dream, or a nightmare. I couldn't decide which. Black iron and polished brass with windows that glowed from within. Steam hissed from beneath it, forming shapes in the air that almost looked like reaching hands before dissipating. The number 13 was painted on the side in gold that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Beautiful, isn't she? I spun around so fast I nearly fell. A man stood behind me where no one had been a second before. He wore a conductor's uniform, but from another era, early 1900s maybe. His face was pleasant enough, middle-aged, with laugh lines around his eyes. But those eyes, they were wrong, too old for his face, like they'd seen centuries pass. First time, he asked, checking a pocket watch that ticked backward. I'm looking for someone, I managed to say. A girl who took this train 3 days ago, he laughed, but it wasn't a cruel sound. Just tired. 3 days, 3 years, 3 decades. Time moves differently on the Millbrook line, miss. But you have a ticket, don't you? They only appear for those who are meant to ride. I pulled out the ticket. It was so hot now it almost burned my fingers. Ah, he said, examining it without touching it. A seeker's passage. Those are rare. Someone you love is lost, aren't they? No, I don't know her. Her mother asked me. Her mother, his expression darkened. Red coat? White gloves? I nodded. Miss, that woman has been standing in that same spot since 1987. Her daughter Emma took this train 37 years ago. Curious that she finally found someone who could see her. Someone who could hold the ticket. My mind couldn't process this. That's impossible. Is it? He gestured to the platform around us. You're standing in a place that doesn't exist, about to board a train to a station that was never built, following the request of a woman who's been dead for 15 years. I'd say we've already passed impossible several stops back. The train whistle sounded again. Closer. Urgent. Decision time, the conductor said. The train only stops here once each night. Well, night relative to your time. Get on, and you might find the girl. Or you might find something else. Or you might find nothing at all and become another story someone tells about Track 13. Stay here, go back up those stairs, and this door will never open for you again. The woman in red will find someone else. Eventually, she always does. I looked at the train. Through the windows I could see figures moving, passengers, but their faces were blurred like looking through water. What happened to Marcus Webb? I asked suddenly. The blogger who came here 3 years ago. The conductor's smile was sad. He found what he was looking for. Whether that was a good thing or not, well, that depends on your perspective. He rides the train now, back and forth, back and forth. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed. The train doors hissed open. Inside, the carriages were beautiful. Red velvet seats, crystal chandeliers. Like something from the Gilded Age. But empty, completely empty except for those blurred figures I'd seen who were nowhere to be found now. Where does it really go? I asked. Millbrook Station, just like the ticket says. But Millbrook isn't a place, miss. It's a condition, a state of being. It's where the lost things go. Lost people, lost dreams, lost possibilities. Some folks, they get stuck between what was and what should have been. This train, it takes them to the only place they can exist. I thought about the woman in red, waiting 37 years. I thought about her daughter, 19 or 20, when she disappeared, according to what the conductor had said. I thought about my own life, safe, predictable, empty in its own way. I got on the train. The moment I stepped inside, the doors sealed shut with a sound like a coffin closing. The conductor didn't follow me in. Through the window, I saw him tip his hat, and then the platform began to slide away. or we were sliding away from it. In that place, it was hard to tell what was moving and what was standing still. The interior of the train was even more beautiful up close. Every surface was carved with intricate patterns. The gas lamps created pools of golden light that made everything look like an old photograph. But it was the silence that got to me first. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. The kind that makes you hear your own heartbeat, your own breathing, the blood rushing through your veins. I walked through the first car, empty. Every seat perfectly arranged, like waiting for passengers who would never come, or had already come and gone. There were newspapers on some of the seats. Different dates, 1925, 1943, 1981, 2003, all from the same day, October 13th. Today was October 13th. I hadn't realized until that moment. The second car was different. This one had luggage in the overhead compartments, old leather suitcases and carpet bags, but also modern backpacks. A laptop bag that looked like mine. I reached up to check one of the older cases and my hand passed right through it, like it was a projection, or like I was. That's when I saw her. She sat in the third car, staring out the window at darkness that moved like liquid, young, maybe 20. Brown hair and a style from the late 80s. She wore a Columbia University sweatshirt and jeans that were definitely vintage now, but would have been new when she got on. "Emma," I called out. She turned, and her face, God, her face was exactly like her mother's. But her eyes were like the conductor's, too old, too tired, like she'd been 20 years old for 37 years. "You can see me," she said, and her voice was hollow. "That means you're between two, not quite living, not quite dead, not quite real, not quite real, not quite dream." "Welcome to the Millbrook line." I sat down across from her. The seat was solid enough. "Your mother sent me. She's still waiting for you." Emma laughed, but it was the saddest sound I'd ever heard. "My mother, she can't let go, can she? Even after everything. After what?" "After she died. Car accident, 2008. But she couldn't move on, couldn't accept that I was gone first, so she waits, and sends people like you to find me. But here's the thing." She leaned forward, and I could smell roses on her. "I chose this. I chose to get on this train." "Why?" "Because I was dying anyway. Cancer. 20 years old and full of tumors. The doctors gave me 3 months. I couldn't watch my mother watch me die. So when I saw her, the lady in the red coat, but not my mother, someone else, when she offered me the ticket, I took it. I thought I was being brave, thought I was sparing my mother the pain." The train began to slow. Outside the window, lights appeared in the darkness, a station platform materializing from nothing. "Millbrook," Emma said. "We're here. We're always here and never here. This is where the choice happens." "What choice? To get off or stay on? Get off, and you become part of Millbrook, whatever that means for you. For me, it would mean accepting what I did, accepting that I abandoned my mother when she needed me most. Staying on means riding forever, back and forth. Never dying but never living, safe in the in-between. Other passengers began to materialize around us, all ages, all eras, all with that same look in their eyes. Some stood to leave, others remained seated. A little boy in Victorian clothing walked past, holding the hand of nothing, or someone I couldn't see. "Marcus Webb," I said suddenly. "Is he here?" Emma pointed to the last car. "He got off once, came back. Now he documents us, says he's writing a book about the phantom passengers of Track 13. As if anyone above would believe it. I stood up. I needed to find him, needed to understand what I'd gotten myself into. But Emma grabbed my wrist. "If you get off at Millbrook," she said, "you can't go back to Grand Central, not the real one. You can go back to Track 13, but the door to the upper world, it only opens from the outside. Unless what? Unless you convince someone else to take your place, give them your ticket, pass on the invitation. That's what my mother's been trying to do. She's been trying to trade herself for me. But I won't let her. I won't get off this train if it means she takes my place." The train had fully stopped now. The doors hissed open. That same copper and roses smell flooded in, but stronger, mixed with something else. Pine trees. Fresh earth. Things that shouldn't exist under Manhattan. I walked to the last car and found Marcus Webb. He looked exactly like his blog photo, but his hair was white now, completely white despite his young face. "Sarah Chen," he said without looking up from his notebook. "Digital marketing manager. 28 years old, no family in New York, few close friends, the perfect candidate. You know who I am? I know everyone who rides this train. It's my job now, my purpose." He finally looked at me. "You want to know how to get out? Yes, there are 3 ways. 1. Convince someone to take your place. 2. Accept your fate and become part of Millbrook. 3. He paused. 3 is why I'm still here, why I can't leave. What's 3? Find the original sin, the first passenger, the one who created the track, the train, the station, the stuff. Find them, understand why this all exists. And maybe you can end it, or maybe you become it. I've been trying for 3 years, 3 years that feel like 30 or 300. The whistle blew. Last call. I'm getting off, I said suddenly. The words surprised me, but I knew they were true. I'm going to find Emma's mother, tell her the truth, tell her Emma chose this. Marcus laughed. You think you're the first? She won't believe you. She can't. She's trapped in her own loop, just like everyone here. But I was already moving. Through the cars, past Emma, who watched me with those ancient eyes, to the door. Millbrook Station stretched out before me. It looked like every small town station from 100 years ago. Wooden platform, single building with peeling paint, forest beyond, but the trees were wrong. They grew in impossible directions. And the sky, there was no sky, just darkness with things moving in it. I stepped off the train. The moment my feet touched the platform at Millbrook, I understood everything. And that understanding came with a price. The station wasn't just a place. It was a memory. A collective memory of every small town that had been swallowed by progress, every person who'd been forgotten, every dream that had died before its time. It existed because we needed it to exist, because humans can't accept that things just end. The building was solid enough. I pushed open the door, and inside was a waiting room that couldn't decide what era it belonged to. Gas lamps and fluorescent lights, wooden benches and plastic chairs, a ticket window with no one behind it, but the walls were covered with photographs, thousands of them. All the passengers who'd ever ridden Track 13. I found Emma's photo, 1987, young and scared and beautiful. I found Marcus's, 2019, determined and foolish. And then, in the corner, so old the paper was nearly destroyed, I found the first one, 1913, a woman in a red coat, but not Emma's mother. Someone else, the original. Margaret Ashford, a voice said behind me. I turned. The conductor stood there, but he looked different in Millbrook, younger, more